that stuff.
Sweet. Cool. Yeah, I want to talk about all that stuff. Well, let's just see where our time difference is. So I'll go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and then if you want to just clap on the downbeat too, and let's clap all 4 beats.
Perfect.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. You want to accent that downbeat? 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Okay, well, it's an experiment, but it's interesting from my perspective. You were exactly a quarter note after me, so your one was my two.
Interesting. So therein find our tempo, and therein lies our lag time.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, let me introduce you. Uh, this is Mark Powers, percussionist, author, educator, actor, and a coin. Sorry, ring maker. What I mean, I know you wear other hats too, but entrepreneur, just someone who's always, I'd say, momentum generator, based in Portland, Oregon, uh, and we've known each other probably 6 or 7 years now, I'd say.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah, we met. We were first Facebook friends, and we were both in Portland. And I think I posted something about looking for some guidance on using Finale, working on a book, percussion book, and then you reached out and we got together and became friends and um, played some music together, hung out, and all that stuff.
Yeah,
So
we had a short-lived project called the Portland Percussion Project with our buddy Steve Shobe, and got
yeah,
together and did all kinds of crazy improv compositions. That was a blast.
yeah, that was a lot of fun. Uh, so yeah, I'd just like to talk about really what more like what you were doing before this whole COVID thing, and then how it's changed, how you've pivoted, and then talk about your studio space uh, and we can talk about our studio space, just really to give any insights for anyone who's looking to do something from their home, whatever it is, be it music, art, or whatever, if they want to share that. So live broadcasts or making videos and posting them on YouTube. Um, really, we can go anywhere with the conversation. But those were some of the things I was thinking about. So if you would just share a little bit about your background and how you started playing and that sort of thing.
Sure. I mean, as far as background goes, I don't know how deep we want to go with all that, but quick overarching overview of everything. I did the typical startup in fifth grade band, playing just snare drum, bass drum, xylophone, all of that regular concert percussion sort of stuff that a lot of us start with. And maybe about 14 years old, got into drum set a little bit and got a little bit more serious a few years later, and started studying at a college a couple years early in Minneapolis. And at the age of 16, started working with just a lot of fantastic players: Dave Stanek, Gordy Knutson, Paul Stuber, just a bunch of the great Twin Cities based players of that time. And yeah, then just after that, after getting out of school, just started really taking an interest in world music styles, and started taking every opportunity I could to travel and study abroad. Spent some time in West Africa and a couple trips to Puerto Rico, and got to Cuba, and just tried to absorb some of the styles that really were the roots of things that I had spent time playing on drum set in the pop world. And then, of course, as things go, that stuff kind of gets infiltrated into your playing. So these days, I mostly play drum set, but I do a fair amount of world percussion in schools, especially just teaching as artists in residence from time to time around the country. And that's pretty much what I do: is a lot of teaching, private lessons, school programs, drum set performing. A good majority of my dates, my gigs are drum set, live performances, a lot of session work around the Portland area. Um, And that's, I guess, kind of it in a nutshell, along with all the other random hobbies that you mentioned, the other random endeavors that I pursue from time to time. I feel that I'm often throwing things at the wall just to see what's going to stick, and some things don't, but every once in a while, some things do, and gives you a break from the regular things that you're doing as well, and you get input and ideas from completely different projects.
And you can come back to what you're doing refreshed as well
Oh yeah, totally.
and
Sometimes
inspired.
it's a break can be a really good thing in a bunch of ways, and so I'm just always I'm really a learner. When I see people doing any number of different things, I often take an interest in it and want to just go down that rabbit hole for a little while and check it out and learn at least a little bit about it. And I think it not only makes you more well-rounded, but also just makes you relate to more and more people. Because you might not be as good as they are in whatever their field is, but maybe you know this little bit about it, which allows you to have a little bit of a conversation with them and come up with good questions to ask them about the thing that they're into. So I just love learning whenever I can.
Yeah, and I think we both studied at the same school in Ghana in West Africa, the Dogbe Center. Didn't you spend some time there?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, the Dagba Center in Kopaiia,
yeah,
about 4 hours outside of the capital of Accra, with
just
the
on the
Agbeli
border
brothers.
or by the border.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I had an amazing experience, and I'm sure you did as well. And so I think that was one of the cool things about getting together and playing together was that we shared that common um, experience, or not the same experience, but we that musical experience, and so even though I hadn't played it in years, I think you've been probably at least teaching it. Like I haven't taught that music in years, and but it was still that a common thing, and we played a little bit of that. So that was really interesting. But I think what you did was kind of an ideal sort of situation for percussion is to travel to so many different percussion cultures. I mean, there's so many cultures that have this tradition of percussion, and you really got to check some out firsthand. For me, I focused on West Africa, which to me is like the roots, but I think I've always dreamt of going to Brazil, going to Cuba, and going to all these places. So that's really cool. Let's see. Do you, so as far as what percentage of like between the teaching school programs, uh, less, all that, what percentage is that compared to sessions um, and gigs and or what percentage was it? I guess I should say.
sure. Just like in general, what am I
Like
doing
like
overall?
like like yeah, like how much match were like I know for me and when I was in Portland, it was probably I'd say my main bread and butter work was teaching, but I would still do gigs and things, but that was kind of extra.
Yeah. For me, it is very perfectly. It's evolved to be very perfectly seasonal and complementary, because I have times of the year when I get very busy doing school programs. Obviously, in the heart of the typical school year. This one not being one of those.
Mm-hmm.
But the very beginning of a school year, I don't normally get a lot of school residency or assembly visits, because every school is just getting into all of their core curriculum and diving into things. But after the school year sets in, I tend to do quite a few, and I do a few around Portland or Oregon in general. I do some back in Wisconsin. I just did a week back in Wisconsin a couple months ago, right before the whole COVID-19 thing, and was scheduled to be back there in a different town at a different school about a week or two ago, which obviously did not happen. But the school year, it gets a lot busier with teaching in schools. And when I'm home and not off playing on tour, I teach private lessons. So I do 2 days a week teaching private lessons at a music store. That used to be my main bread and butter, and I was teaching 50 to 65 students a week for years, actually,
Mm-hmm.
and not performing as much. But I pulled that back to about 20 students. 22, I think, is my max, so that I just have a lot more time free for performing and stuff. But the amazing thing schedule wise for me is that around the end of the school year, when school programs stop and they won't take place for the rest of the summer, that's exactly when all of my gigging picks up. So, most of my, at least the travel gigging, all the touring stuff that would take me out of town and make it impossible to do that stuff anyway. And around the time that school programs start picking back up, then that touring gigging anyway, dies off, and stuff tends to be a little bit more local or a quick in and out over the weekend. And around that time in the fall as well, when I'm around home, is often when recording session work starts to pick up a little bit too. Because a lot of people in the fall, they're starting to record for their summer releases because you need several months to put everything together and then promo things. So it's a really good time. When I'm home, the school programs and session work tend to pick up. And then around the time that both of those things dry up, the touring picks up quite a bit. And these days I do a little bit more session work year round, but not nearly as busy as November through February probably. And we're getting close to June, July, which is often when somebody is if they're going to record a Christmas album, that's when they're doing it. So to get ready for the holidays as well. But yeah, I'm fortunate that all of these things tend to work in tandem, and then all of the things on the periphery, all the acting or other projects I do, I'm able to just choose when I say yes to, so I can see when I have holes in my calendar or choose when I have more of a desire to pursue one of those things.
Yeah. How did you get into acting? Had you done acting in school, or was it just something you picked up?
No, I did. I had one stage acting experience in school years ago, and I cannot say that it was a great one. Not because it was a horrible experience, but just because I didn't have much experience doing it and don't think I was very great at it, so it wasn't like some amazing experience. But I've gotten involved over the last few years with some speaking engagements and learning that being a speaker on stage, whether it's at a TEDx event or even at schools teaching the things that I'm familiar with, I didn't think that my speaking skills were very good. So I started attending Toastmasters, an organization all around the world that just works on leadership and speaking skills. And after doing that for a few months and being up in front of a small group of people on a regular basis, I ended up kind of getting into some acting lessons. I had some friends who were actors, and I'd started doing a little bit of background acting. Portland obviously has a lot of shows being filmed here. The Librarians used to be here, and Grimm, and all these TV
Portland, yeah.
shows. So I did background for Librarians and a couple little things like that. And that was kind of interesting, just being on the set. And I had some actor friends who said that it was ridiculous that I was doing background acting, that I should just do regular acting. And I remember thinking that that didn't make sense at all because I had no background in acting, because I wasn't in theater or anything in the past. And one of them said, "Oh man, go to my acting teacher." And he hooked me up with this guy, one lesson, and not only was I blown away by the guy's skill, but I was also hooked. So I've just been at it at least a little bit here and there ever since.
So it's a relatively newfound interest and thing you've been working on.
Yeah. I think 2017 was when I had my first acting lesson, and probably 6 months later, started auditioning for just little student film projects. And since then, I'll do an occasional short film or a commercial or something like that in the area.
Did you ever talk with Richard Redmond about acting?
We haven't chatted about it too much, but yeah, I love watching him online with all of the things he's doing, including classes. I think he just posted maybe today about a group class. He's constantly taking acting lessons. And a while ago, I think it was over the winter, late fall, early winter, I was at my wife's family's place, and we were watching a movie one night, and suddenly there was this radio disc jockey doing an interview, and it was Rich Redmond. And I remember jumping up and running to the TV to take a picture to text off to him, because I couldn't believe it. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Rich. It was great.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Rich Redmond is he wears many hats as well, but he's based in Nashville, and he drums with Jason Aldean band, and that's his main gig. But he does acting and a lot of other things, and he is the consummate worker as far as just always having things going, and he's really good about letting people know on Facebook and the social media. But anyway, but in some ways I feel like you two are similar in that you both work really hard and really keep a lot of plates spinning or irons in the fire.
I do try to keep a bunch of plates spinning. I do not feel that I have the energy that Rich does, man. That guy blows.
His energy's amazing. Yeah, for sure.
It's absolutely impressive.
I've had a phone conversation with him and met him in person at the Apple store. That was the only time we ever talked. But yeah, he's got a lot of energy, and he's really respected here in Nashville. Um, and so yeah, anyway, it's definitely inspiring what you all are doing. Um, so so let's talk about kind of some of the shift of working from home with COVID. Um, and I know you recently bought a house and you've been really doing a lot of work to set up your space. Um, and yeah, let's talk about that, and also maybe strategies of teaching online, and ways of getting across what you want to get across. But also, we can talk about the specifics of your room, the gear, all that stuff. For anyone who might be interested. And if anyone has any questions about anything, we will do our best to answer those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to chat about all of the above. Um, yeah, when we bought the house, the idea of building a home drum studio so that I could not only practice but be able to do some remote drum tracking and things along those lines, create video content, private lessons, whatever. That was in the cards from the get-go. I mean, that's part of the I think part of the idea of getting a house for a musician, definitely for a drummer, is to be able to create that space where you can do your thing right around the corner. But the COVID-19 situation definitely kicked that into high gear, put a few other house projects that were in the works on the back burner for a while so I could just dive into this 100%. And it's been a bunch of work, but has really been turning out nice. And we just took a bedroom in the house that had been kind of earmarked as the drum studio from the get-go.
What floor? What is your house like? Like, is it multi-level or is it?
Yeah, the house is multi-level. It's actually three levels. So there's a lower level with a garage and family room area, and then the shared living space above that with kitchen, living room, an art studio for my wife, and then above that is all the bedrooms.
Uh-huh.
And so it's actually on the third floor, which ideally in a lot of situations with a drum space, you try to get a basement,
Yeah.
area just because it makes all the soundproofing work way easier.
Hmm.
And in a house like this, unless you're completely able to decouple a space, a room inside a room, and have maybe several inches of space on all sides, you're not going to get 100% soundproof. I don't care what you do.
Yeah.
But your goal, obviously, for what we do is to minimize that sound leaving the space as much as possible. So the first phase of work is just doing that, just trying to cut down as much sound as you can so you can make noise in the room and not have the neighbors get upset. So in here, there were three exterior walls and one interior wall. So that being the one that wasn't insulated, wouldn't have been because it was inside. I was going to tear off the drywall and insulate it, but instead we built a secondary wall in front of that one and
Hmm.
insulated that. So it just became thicker and insulated. And then all the way around the room, we horizontally mounted what's called resilient channel, which is little steel strips that end up standing, creating about almost a half-inch air gap once you put drywall onto it. So
Uh,
the drywall, essentially the resilient channel got screwed into the studs, but then the drywall gets screwed into the resilient channel to minimize as much contact as you can, cut down as much contact as you can from the inside of the room going out. So
uh,
on top of that resilient channel went 5/8 drywall, and then this stuff called polyglass, which is like an asphalt roofing underlayment that's
uh,
it's called torch down. Normally you put it on a roof and you actually torch it and
uh,
melt it down. And that not only creates another layer and little tiny bits of air gap, but it's also just extremely heavy. The stuff is just a pain to work with, and so it just creates mass for the walls because
uh,
you're trying to thicken the walls, create different elements in there, and also just weight the thing down, create a heavy mass. So that went on, and then another layer of 5/8 drywall. So it was just kind of this big sandwich. There was air,
big
drywall,
and
asphalt.
room within the room.
Yeah, without being able to fully decouple it and have a couple inches, and so that was the walls, and then a little underlayment and uh, short joists, insulation, and flooring that raise the floor up just to minimize a little bit going down into the house. And then the brown door you see behind me is a second door, so we cut off the corner of the room and added a second entryway to, again, kind of minimize sound as much as possible. And at this
Oh,
point,
so there's two doors to get out. Is that what you mean by
yeah,
that? So you
Yeah,
have one door, and then you go through the next door to be out into your
yep,
in your house.
exactly.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so
Have
just
you walked around? Have you asked Autumn to play really loud and walk around the house to
yeah,
listen?
yeah. Actually, our buddy Steve Shobe was over not too long ago, and he was able to bash away too, and got to run around the
What
house.
does it sound like in different parts of the house?
Inside the house, I mean, it's certainly audible, but the wife will watch TV and says that it doesn't bother her.
Uh,
So that's not bad. Again, my main concern was outside, and outside you can hear something's happening, but it sounds like a dull thud, which
uh,
it shouldn't really be too much of an issue as long as I'm maybe not doing it all hours of the day. But so after that, then it was just a matter of internally treating the room because you go from the room not sounding great, a typical bedroom with parallel walls and sound bouncing around, to it's starting to sound good once you have as you're adding insulation and stuff, and then once you get all those dry walls, it's back to not sounding good anymore.
mm,
So then you do the internal treatment. So for me, it was some Orlex foam, the bass traps in the corners, and got a little wood laminate wall behind me, just kind of for aesthetic, for some video stuff later on,
hmm.
and then foam on top of the flooring as well. So the foam floors and the Orlex treatment in kind of strategic spots to diffuse things has really made the inside sound a lot better now too.
Oh, nice. And as far as the or like, can you give a little tour of the room and just kind of show where the treatment is?
I
Or do you mind?
might not be able to do that. Let's
Oh,
see.
no worries if not. But so in the bass traps, they go all the way down, up and down on the each corner. Is that
Yeah,
right?
actually, I can. You know what I can do? I can share screen. The bass traps. Oh, I think I need you to
Oh,
enable DJ.
let's see. I'm not sure how to do that. Uh, where we go. Allow participants to unmute themselves. I don't see that. Do you know where that is?
I do not.
Okay.
Not on your side. That's all
Um,
right.
okay. Uh, I could send you an email and invite you could if you wanted to get on like a phone or something like that.
That's all right. I can kind of give a little rundown. You can kind of see the bass traps behind me there, actually.
Yeah.
So on that wall, or on that corner, ceiling to floor bass traps, and that's the case in two of the corners. In one corner behind the computer here, that didn't work just because of some things in the room, but it does take up half the wall, and then bass traps up above the doorway there as well.
Oh, okay.
So those were that's the big base end stuff, and then otherwise the regular one by one squares, the two fin and four fin. I know you've got the burgundy four fin back behind you, so
Mhm.
exact same ones there. And yeah, just kind of tried to lay them out so that you're absorbing and diffusing in spots where there are parallel kind of flat facing walls and things. So I've kind of got this chair rail of sorts on this side, so there's not foam quite in that same spot on the other side, which is good because actually I'm getting ready to mount like a 55-inch monitor there that will be used for a lot of the stuff that I do.
Nice.
Um, but then
What is the monitor for?
the monitor will be for Pro Tools and live streaming and just kind of a variety of things, so you can kind of break up the screen a couple different ways. But then the foam will be above and below that as well, where it is not on this wall. So just trying to be strategic about that.
Uh-huh. What is well maybe let's say before and after COVID. What did a typical day look like? A work day?
Oh man, typical workday before, nothing was typical. I mean, aside from maybe occasionally Mondays and Tuesdays because when I'm home it's my regular teaching schedule, so those were semi planned out. But otherwise, Wednesday through Sunday, it really just depended on the week, whether there were sessions going on, things like that. So it's
Do
kind
you
of
have
all.
a certain schedule you keep in the morning where okay, I wake up at this time, I exercise, then I do emails or anything like that? that is.
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, I do tend to be an early riser. My wife's a school teacher, so I am a huge fan of getting up at 5:30, 5:45, and when she'd be on her way out the door at 6:45, that's time for me to just sit down and start cranking because
And what time do you go to bed? I'm just curious, getting up that early.
uh not super early or late. I would say anywhere between 10:30 and midnight.
Okay.
But it depends on the night, and that obviously changes when like late music evenings can totally throw that for a loop once in a while.
Yeah.
And tour season, that's totally different because then you're on the road, you're getting back, into the van, and the hotel's super late, and you're getting up later, and so there are definitely times of my life where that gets turned on its head. But yeah, I tend to be up early because I really love how much work I can get done before other musicians wake up.
And
Uh,
what kind of work would you do in the morning typically?
Jumping on the computer tends to be a lot of computer work, and blasting through the emails. Getting through. Recently, I've been working on some video edits for a couple of projects, so a lot of that kind of stuff. I seem to work really well just grabbing some tea in the morning and sitting at the computer and cranking on that stuff for a couple of hours. And then when I go about the day, I feel like a lot of the emails have been caught up on and that sort of stuff. But
Mhm.
now, post, I shouldn't say post COVID, maybe during
Yeah.
COVID-19 right now, um, that's a little different. I mean, still waking up pretty early most days, but I don't have to leave the house to go to do many of those things. So since session work has almost tanked completely because of this. I mean, there have been a few little, socially distant recording situations that I've been involved with, but not nearly as many as would normally be the case. So that's been why I've been putting my energy into this space, really, because I want to get to the point even before this started, I wanted to get to the point where I had a space to just do remote tracking and get to collaborate with my own band faster and things like that. But now it's less of a luxury and more of a necessity. So during this situation, aside from teaching, doing the Zoom lessons on Monday and Tuesdays, I've been really spending almost every day in the studio space, just kind of cranking on it and getting it up and running.
Kind of learning, getting like that's your instrument right now.
Oh,
Like learning
totally.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, learning about the building, researching gear, acquiring the gear, learning how to run, Pro Tools, and so a huge learning curve with all the gear and
Yeah, and Pro Tools, for anyone who might be tuning in who's not familiar, Pro Tools is a industry standard recording software. Uh, the main, most often you hear of Pro Tools or Logic, but Pro Tools would be, I'd say, more pro. Though there's been a lot of great music that's come out on Logic. Um, I use Logic. Um, so you got your space set up, and you got new. I know we talked before. You got new mics. You got interfaces for your computer. Did you need to get a new computer as well, or did you already have a computer that would work well for that?
I did. I got a Mac Mini, so I ended up going with just the Mac Mini because there will occasionally be things that I'll do here on the laptop, but not with Pro Tools and such. But so the Mac Mini is really dedicated to the recording stuff, and only went with that and not a regular iMac or anything with the screen because of the monitor that I'm setting up across the room. Um, and then I'm waiting on PreSonus's unit called the Fader port, which will be
Hmm.
used to do a lot of the remote controlling of Pro Tools, so that
Okay.
because I want to be able to control everything from right here behind the kit, so be able to arm tracks and start and stop everything
Yeah.
without having to walk to a computer and back all the time.
Yeah. And so I was going to ask you about other. So as far as I'm kind of in a similar situation where I think our rooms, when we talked, are around the same size, about 10 by 10, something like that. So I'll just give a little quick tour of this. Um, so I have a closet here. I'm going to move this with my monitors and mixer there. Um, Here, there's a big window. And then I just got this light yesterday.
Nice.
Um, so I was doing some research and been doing a number of live videos, and so I wanted to up the quality. And from the research I did and from asking people, it sounded like lighting was the next step for me. So that, and then the camera. So right now I'm using my laptop computer. The next step, I'll probably get a webcam and eventually get a nice mirrorless digital camera that I can use. And then there's also what's it called, the MTEM. There's a interface that's supposed to be good for live streaming and
Oh, cool.
video. I think we talked about that before.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
There was something I had just seen recently. There's a little iOS video switcher that seems like it'd be pretty cool too. I'll have to.
that's what this is, and it's made by Black Magic. Was it the
Oh,
one you
cool.
looked at by? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one I've seen. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So for me, I think lighting. I'm going to see how it is with this one light. I'm waiting for the what's it called, the shadow box, the to make it softer light right now.
Softbox.
Softbox, yeah.
Yep, yep.
So I'm waiting for that. I should get that tomorrow to make the lighting softer and hopefully nicer light. So I'll do the lighting, and then actually I might do something with backdrop, because like I think can you kind of turn your camera to show how you have the wood paneling and see what
Yeah,
that looks like.
absolutely.
You definitely consider the aesthetics in that. So
Um,
yeah, so this all there's a
yeah,
the
the top and bottom is all kind of the dark wood laminate with just the foam going through the middle. Um, yeah, I dig the look a lot.
Yeah, it's a good look, and it'll be nice for videos. Um, and so what are some strategies you use for teaching now, and as far as to give a good experience for your students?
Uh, that's a great question. I mean, things have changed so much. I have a relatively new podcast with another Portland drummer named Joe Mangus called the Drum Ed Podcast, and our latest episode is talking about teaching online because it's something that maybe some of us have done, maybe some of us haven't done, but pretty much all of us are doing now if we're doing any teaching.
Yeah.
And things definitely shifted a lot because I'm not able to be in the same room with the student, sit next to the student, and poke my finger at the music to keep them in
Mhm.
place where I want them to be.
Or playing with them, as we as we illustrated playing together, how it was
Yeah,
a beat off at that tempo.
exactly. Or even be able to, as Joe and I talk in the podcast, even just having a student work with a metronome is different because I'm not sitting there next to them starting up the metronome and having them work with it. So, number one problem I discovered is many of my students didn't know how to operate a metronome as well as I
Ah,
thought they did because I
uh-huh.
was the one doing it in the lessons. So, that's something I will change when we are physically back in the room. Is I will start making sure the students are starting and stopping the metronome. Um, and another challenge there is that in the lesson room, sitting next to them, if they start sliding off of the metronome, I can either stop them or I can give them some, like gesture cues. And sometimes you have a kid starts up their metronome, they start bashing away, and they're not looking at you on the computer. And it doesn't matter how much waving and yelling you do,
Yeah.
you just keep playing, and they're not doing it right. And that's a big challenge with online is getting us trying to stop a student before they practice a mistake too many times.
Yeah. I've experienced
Some
that
students
many
are very
times.
attentive to the screen, and others aren't. Where in the lesson room, you could just put the kibosh on it and just go, no, like hold on a second, like there's this little thing that I want to tweak before you practice it, ingrain it. Um, but things I've been doing is really recording some things for some students, shooting some video,
Hmm.
and then taking the lesson notes that I write for them that would normally be in a notebook that they bring in and out of lessons and uploading them online so that they can access them and that's good. I'm able to kind of do some prep before the lessons a little more than I did in the past because I can access those and take a peek right before the lesson and kind of have something a little bit more ready myself. But it's definitely it's definitely a little weird.
Yeah, it's different. I've been teaching for 4 years. I moved to Nashville 4 years ago from Portland, and I brought some students with me, and I still have some students from Portland. But before teaching online, I was presented with an opportunity where I was asked to do an interview, and the person, Christopher Ryan, who's a New York Times bestselling author, which I didn't realize at the time. He took a group class with me, asked me to do an interview, and said, "By the way, I have listeners from around the world. You should offer lessons online." And so my first thought is, I have no idea how I would teach online. I've been teaching for 16 years or whatever it was, and so I needed to find a teacher. I realized, and so I found a teacher. Daniel Glass, who's very active online. He was, and I think I've told you about this before, but I found him and was like, okay, he's my teacher, and he sort of started mentoring and teaching me, and he's actually partially responsible for me being in Nashville. But anyway, so for me, what I realized the keys to teaching online were good notes, like you're saying, giving good, clear directions on what it is the student's working on, and having videos if needed, and or whatever it is to make it really clear. So I then made it a point to always have videos of the PowerPoint, and it creates a lot more work, but I feel like there's we want to offer value now, especially, and and make it a good experience where the student feels like they're getting something out. So now I feel like it's even more like I'm creating more play-alongs and that sort of thing.
Right.
But I think I know we're streaming this to the online music teachers group that I started when the COVID thing started. So anyway, so just trying to give some ideas for what people can do in this conversation. But yeah, so I think we're doing a lot of the same things as far as that goes.
For sure.
And so what are some other things that you found were ways to kind of compensate for the lack of being in the same room with them, not being able to play together? One other thing is with the metronome, I don't know if you do this, I'll say, okay, we'll find our tempo, and then we both have metronomes with tempo. And I definitely have experience where they don't know how to use a metronome, but now I've coached them enough that they know how to use their metronomes.
Yeah, that has been a biggie, is getting not every one of my students, but a good majority of my students up to speed with really how to use their metronome well. And for me, one of the positives has been seeing students' drum sets and
Oh
hearing
yeah, that's huge.
and getting to hear them. And I've had
Why is that tom way over here?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I just had that conversation with a student who I never realized he was sitting down at a kit and had his legs spread about as far as they could possibly be. His hi-hat was way over here. He comes into the lesson room week after week, and when we first start off with lessons, we talk about all the names of the kit. We talk about ergonomics and setup and stuff. Sometimes I get a photo of a kid's setup and stuff, but you're not there on a regular basis. Every once in a while, I have a student whose house I'll be able to go over to and do a tuning or something in their space and help them get a new kit set up or something. But yeah, all of a sudden I realize, like, he's been coming in week after week with a normal setup, but going back home and having the feet pulled away as far as he possibly can.
I've experienced the same thing. You kind of assume, or it's possible to assume that they understand, but you don't really know until you see what their setup is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've had a couple of lessons just recently that have been just about tuning, and honestly, I've went online and ordered a metronome for a student and had it delivered to their house. I have had a couple of drum keys delivered to students' homes, and then the next week it's like, all right, you got that key in the mail. Like, what we're going to talk about today is how to start tuning those toms up and make them sound better. And it's great because without exception, every one of my students who we went over tuning while on their drum set, they've been more inspired to play after the fact.
That's great.
The drums sound great. When your instrument sounds good, like, you want to be sitting there playing it, and
Definitely.
you maybe never realized how bad it actually sounded. So yeah, each week after a student's kind of tuning lesson, they've always been excited and been practicing more than they had the prior weeks. So it's been good in that way.
Do you have a way of setting expectations, like what you expect from the students when you start with them, or in general, or kind of resetting with the student to let them know what you want from them?
Yeah, actually, also something Joe and I talked about in one of our first episodes, just kind of expectations and policies as well. I do, because this is a difficult thing to talk about, because some people can sometimes take this the wrong way, but I am completely not the teacher for every student. and I try to lay that out. So when somebody goes online to register, I have a registration link, and I set students up using a software called mymusicstaff.com.
Mm.
And as they're going to sign up on that, which does the billing and scheduling, and also now has our online resources, so I can upload an MP3 or a PDF or whatever. There is a page of just what supplies they need, and there's also a page that explains expectations and policies. And along the expectation routes, I mean, the biggest is obviously practice. And again, I used to teach 50, 55, 60, 65 students a week for a long time, and I intentionally have pulled that back to just over 20. And part of that is because I want to focus on playing more, because that's obviously the first love. Part of it is that I want the teaching that I do to be as valuable as possible. So if someone is, this is where some people occasionally take it wrong. If someone is wanting to take lessons simply because they think it's fun, but you learn after a while that they have no desire to practice, that's honestly just not the student for me. And I am getting quicker and quicker to tell people to give people a list of other drummers I know in the area, because I will joke sometimes that I do babysit, but my rate is a lot higher than it is for drum lessons, and nobody wants to pay that. But really, what it is for me is, I mean, I want I want my teaching to be fulfilling for me, but
Hmm.
also for my students, and I want it to make sense financially for their parents. And if they're in school band, I want this to be a very valuable experience for their band teachers and their band programs. So I seriously want like a four-way win. For me, the student, the parents, the band teacher. And because I tend to stick to that in the town of Salem where I teach private lessons, almost every time there are the all city band competitions, a good majority of the percussionists end up being students of mine. And
That's
not
great.
saying that to brag at all, just saying that because the students who I end up choosing to work with are students. It doesn't mean that they're the best players, but the students I choose to work with are players who do want to be there and they're practicing, which in the end makes them the best players. I mean, that's going to happen, but I'm not choosing them because I'm not choosing one kid over another because he's a better player. This lesser, player who has achieved less, and mechanics and musicality and everything, but wants to be practicing every day, that's my kid. I'll work with him all the time,
Likewise.
even if
Yeah.
his growth is very slow.
Well, it's funny. I have different situations for private students. That's the situation that I have, or that's the situation that I always aspire for, is where the student is inspired to want to improve and grow. But then I have group classes where, like, my wife, she took my class, and she told me at the beginning of the class, I just want to have fun, be around people. I'm not going to practice. And so anyway, so for certain situations, I, I I understand that's just they just want to have fun. So for that situation, you may not want to join this other class that's more serious. You might want to stay in this class. Um,
Exactly.
but I was going to ask you also about what are some things you do to inspire and to keep the interest of students. I've been thinking a lot about this recently. I have some students who well, like one is a new student who um, I can tell he's into it, but it's new. Like the like regular practice is new and that sort of thing. So anyway, so what are some things you do to inspire and to help kind of nudge them along?
Sure. For me, one thing I found that actually has been really great over the years is honestly me taking off to study in different places, because it's, again, I think it's kind of a win-win-win situation. It's been good for me because I have new things I bring back to my playing and my teaching, but I've had numerous students and parents say that they are totally cool with me doing that because I bring back cool, fresh ideas.
Mm,
Not that every student is getting the same level of information disseminated to them, depending on whether they're at ability wise, but that historically has been good for me. And then another thing I do, a while back, I started implementing essentially a monthly lesson theme
Mm.
So on top of whatever things that any given student's working on, there's some overarching thing that everybody works on. Again, they're not working on it at the same level necessarily, but uh, for instance, January. This January, it was um, year 2020. We somehow ran with this like 20/16 or 5/4 idea, and kind of doing the fractions. And all of my students, very few of them are doing anything in 5/4 time, but everybody did something in 5/4,
Mm.
and this could just be the most simple little rock beat with an extra, snare and hat at the end, or some others got more involved and we started talking about like some Vinnie Colaiuta, grooves from playing with Sting, and
Mm.
so it gets kind of progressively more difficult as the weeks go on and depending on where you're at as a player. And then with some of these, I try to work on a little play along track. So I'll get an Ableton and I'll just make a little MIDI file so that the students can play with, because then I can export that at 6 different tempos, and the same track somebody could gradually work with, progressively at different speeds. um, February is Black History Month, so we did a deep dive. um, Many of my students could tell you how insane the coordination was. We did a deep dive into like West African rhythms of Gahu, which you're familiar
Mm.
with from Ghana, but applied to the drum set. So
Cool.
um, we did that, and then we did March, right around the beginning of the whole COVID thing. We had just started a speed month, so all of my students in their first lesson of the month, we were using the drumometer to track how many notes they could play in 60 seconds.
Uh,
Talking about the fact that this is not because we're trying to make it an athletic event, but that speed is useful to play musical phrases, and every student was just going to be in competition with his or herself.
mm.
So tried to track nobody knew it was a contest until after they did their first speed run, so that nobody could game the system and go particularly slow
Uh,
first time. But the goal is to see who increases the highest percentage, not the highest number, because again, that's not really fair to somebody who hasn't been playing long. But who increases the most. So occasionally, I'll have these little like month-long challenges. We did with the Flam. The Flam drag, I think back in November, just the rudiment, and same sort of thing. See who could increase the rudiment more, and then there's always some sort of prize, like a pair of sticks or something like that.
that's great.
Um, Most recently, a lot of the students have been, because of Bill Withers passing, they've been digging into some version of the Use Me groove that James
Oh
Gadsden.
yeah, that's a great groove.
It's just one of the funkiest grooves on the planet.
Gadsden, the drummer.
Oh, so good, man.
Yeah,
He's a
I delved into that groove when I moved to Nashville. I think I was at a jam session where I think we played. I kept hearing "Ain't No Sunshine," but that led me to Use Me, and it's like, oh, that groove is just
Yep. Yeah,
yeah.
I've broken it down into exercises in what I call 3 levels of Use Me. Like there's a simple level, there's pretty much what most of us play live, and then there's actually what Gadsden was doing in some situations, like doubling up cross sticks and basses. I'm,
Uh,
I'm working on laying it out in article form right now to kind of
oh,
put it
cool.
a little bit.
Well, what's
But
the
yeah,
article for? Or what public?
I haven't even
Something.
picked it yet. I'm not sure.
Well, that's a good example of how you're always, I think, creating forward momentum. Is that you have things, and even if there's not a place for it yet, it's there for whenever there is a place for it.
Yeah.
And I'd love to talk more about that because I've always admired how you, yeah, you just, it seems like you're always working on things and you're always uh, keeping some momentum of some sort. And I know it probably feels totally different for yourself because you're showing up every day. But from an outsider, being that I am not you, it appears that you're always really working on keeping a momentum. I mean, even now I know some people have I've seen posts like some Nashville drummers who I'm friends with on Facebook say, I haven't touched the drums in a month or whatever, because they were playing 5 days a week, and I can understand maybe it's good to take a break, like we talked about before. But anyway, so what are some things that you do, like and also what are some of the kind of behind the scenes workings that you do to kind of the life of a musician is not always it's not always so glamorous. What are some of the other little details of what you do?
Oh man, I don't know. Yeah, very little of it is glamorous, if anything. uh, I'm
You're not practicing 10 hours a day, are you?
No, I wish that I wish that I had the time to practice 10 hours a day. I also wish I had the devotion to practice 10 hours a day. I don't, I mean, I love playing drums. I love practicing drums, but I also it's one part of this giant sphere of things that I'm into, and so I also love learning these other things like we were talking about before. And those things also take time to
Mhm.
study and to keep up on and whatever. Um, but no, for me, I think the unglamorous side is just really the fact that I am in general kind of a constant idea generator. I'm constantly, I mean, I will wake up in the middle of the night making notes, and I have, um, different places that I keep lists. I use Asana.com, like kind of a task organizer. And so I just have way too many things that I want to pursue and look into or research or find out about. Um, and so I would say a big part of my average day when I don't have something scheduled is somehow knocking off a bunch of those things, the never ending to do list. And occasionally when I do, because I do some annual planning and try to check in each quarter, but more often than not, I also find that some of that planning is actually going back through some lists and deciding what not to do.
What to drop off the list, or
Exactly, so that you
uh,
can streamline a little
like this
bit.
has been on the list for 5 years. I'm really not going to do this.
Right, right. Well,
Yeah.
and that, it's like this current situation right now. I mean, there was a little meme that I saw pop out that, was something along the lines of, if there's something you've been saying you're going to do as soon as you have the time to, and you're not doing it right now, like it wasn't a time issue, it was a motivation issue. Like, and you know what? That's okay. Like, I mean, there are probably some exceptions to that, but uh, it's okay to realize wow, I've been saying I wanted to do this thing for a long time, but you forget about it. I got other stuff because we grow in different directions over a period of time, and that's
Definitely.
okay.
Yeah,
But
this time has been really good for me to like actually be able to do some of those things that were on the back burner, and also to kind of reassess some things like, do I really need to be doing that? Like that was a drag for me. Do I really need to do that? You
mhm.
know, so I feel like the more we can kind of figure out also what what's working and that sort of thing. So that's been my challenge. And also how do you stay focused with so many interests and ideas? How do you keep kind of well? I think you kind of answered that in some ways. You said you are always working at checking things off the list, but yeah, how do you keep things going and not and feel like you have some direction?
I honestly, I think there's ebb and flow in that. I think there are times where I don't feel like I'm accomplishing the goals that I want to be doing, just like anybody else. And sometimes, I mean, we all know that deadlines tend to be a good motivator. All of a sudden, you're like, crap, that thing is due. I've got to get that to somebody. You cram and get it done. And when I realize that I'm really not accomplishing something that I wanted to be getting done pretty seriously, when it's something that I truly want to do myself and not something that I'm being forced to do because I said I would for somebody or something,
Mm-hmm.
um, a great motivator for me sometimes that I've learned from somebody else years ago is just creating my own unrealistic deadline. So I mean, and I've done it with a bunch of things in the past with Rita Mista, which was a world percussion play along CD I did a couple of years ago. That was something that had been on my list for ages, and literally I was driving through town one day and thought about it for the umpteenth time and just said, you know what, this is stupid. Like I keep thinking, oh, I've got to find a couple musicians to play on some tracks. I got to get a recording studio lined up. I got to do this, that, and suddenly realize that all of those things that I imagined would be weeks or months of work, I could probably figure out in about the next 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally pulled over on the side of the road, made a list of studios that I knew, of a couple of people and a couple of musicians, and I sent some texts or made a couple of calls. And within about 20 minutes, I had things lined up to in 2 weeks go into the studio and record the tracks I needed. And I realized like that's stupid. I somehow in our heads we're able to sometimes inflate these things to thinking that to imagining that they are going to take way more work, way more time than they often do. And some things do for sure. But I found with writing and publishing, with, uh, you know, working on a lot of our own projects, a lot of our own passion projects, more often than not, we're putting them off because either we're perfectionist or we're too busy working on other people's things instead of our own, or
Mhm.
honestly, we're scared of success. We're scared of finishing that thing and scared what somebody's going to say about it. And that unrealistic deadline, telling myself that, it's Friday right now. I've been saying I want to write this article by 7 o'clock tonight. I have to have it done.
Uh-huh.
Instead of thinking like, oh, by June I'll send this off to somebody. It's like crap. It's got to be done by 7 o'clock tonight. Just suck it up.
Yeah.
So I sometimes have to slap myself and just kind of put an unrealistic deadline on something.
That's great you're able to do that. It's funny. I think some of the things that are hard for that can be a challenge for artists and musicians and you know anyone doing something creative or creating something to get over is the fear of judgment. And when my son was born, I felt like I didn't know if I would ever work again because I just felt like my world was my son. But one thing I did during that first year that really helped me, and this is something other people could do as well, was I created artificial deadlines. I said I'm going to do a groove per week. I'm putting it out there no matter what, and some of them were there were different levels of quality, but forcing myself to do that helped me get more comfortable with that discomfort. And so also this, now when we started staying home, I started doing, all these different live broadcasts. And, sometimes I felt like they were, there were ones that were better than others. And the quality, when I first started doing it, it was just the laptop, no sound, nothing. Then I was like, okay, I'm going to try plugging in my Apogee, analog digital interface. And then, so then I'm starting to mess with that. And then there's lag between the audio and but just kind of step by step. And like now, okay, I got my room semi set up and I'm going to do lighting and then camera, so anyway, so that's just for people who might be thinking about doing something that it is, people always say you just have to start. But I think if you start and you're just continually trying to improve it, that's the main thing. If people see that it's improving, I think they'll appreciate that.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's never going to be perfect, no matter what,
and you'll
and
always see the imperfections, especially of your own, whatever
yeah,
you're creating.
and not trying to wait until you have everything perfect before launching the thing is just setting yourself up for never launching it, because you'll never feel like it's everything that you want it to be. So yeah, I definitely I along those lines, two things that have developed about me which were not innate. I come from the Midwest, from a culture who largely is scared, doesn't like the idea of you putting yourself out there too much in the world or being a little too weird or having too strong of a stance about something because, oh my God, what are people going to think?
Mm.
Like, somebody might not like you for that. And that's where I come from. And it's like kind of deep down inside me still.
Mm.
Um, but I've mostly gotten over it. Or I don't know if you'll ever get over it, but I've
Y-
fought back hard
Oh
against it.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's obvious. I mean, because you're constantly putting things out there, and I'm sure you've learned a ton for each step of the way with every endeavor that you've
Totally, and
done.
I mean, totally true that a small success gives you a little bit more confidence to try, something else, and then success with one of those, I fail with some, but success with one gives you a little more confidence for the next one. But for me, there are two biggies that been like pushed my life towards. One is a concept called Ready, Fire, Aim, which it goes along the lines of what we were just talking about, not being perfect. Like I get an idea, I kind of fire and shoot it out there before I've perfectly aimed, and some people would be totally against that. But I just do it knowing now, after having tried to do the opposite, knowing that I'm never really hitting any real target because it's not perfect to me and I'm going to want to change it. So instead, I just put shit out there and change it and fix stuff and clean things up and polish and add another element as I go. And then the other thing for me, as you were talking about before, with us having difficulty putting ourselves out there for judgment, um, as weird as it is, I have like kind of gotten over the public judgment thing. Not that somebody couldn't post something that wouldn't kind of like stab for a little bit, but I kind of love haters. I know it sounds really, really weird, but I mean, I've got YouTube videos where people have jumped on. I was teaching something, and some people jump on and attack and are like, "Oh, that's horrible West. That's not proper technique. Blah blah blah, whatever." And had my own mom go, "Oh my gosh, you can delete those comments, right? You can't have other people reading them saying that about you."
Mm.
And no, like as far as I'm concerned, I know putting myself out there that there's going to be some good potentially come out of it, but I'm also subjecting myself to any negative, and I'm okay with that. And they have a right to have an opinion about it. The only things I tend to delete on comments anywhere is if somebody gets off color. I mean, I'm not going to put up with just racism on like my Puerto Rican videos or
Mm.
anything else like that.
Yeah.
Um, and but aside from that, like they can trash me. I don't care. And I've had videos that have sat up there for a while, had comments, and then over a period of time, somebody else jumped on and said, "Wait a second, do you hear what he said in the beginning of that? Like, blah blah blah." Or, "Yeah, I had a teacher teach me that same thing." And somebody comes to bat for you.
Mm.
You weren't even asking for it, you know. But like, I'm not going to defend myself. And I've just learned, I kind of like just a little bit of me kind of likes pushing buttons once in a while. Tim Ferriss said that people are polarized when one of the three B's are threatened: their beliefs, behaviors, or belongings.
Mm.
And sometimes you put something out there that like somebody just doesn't feel, you know, somebody maybe like me, the past me, who coming from my past culture, like feels like uncomfortable, like that kind of fights against my behavior, what I would do, or my beliefs, and that, you know, could trigger me and make me pissed that that guy is going online and doing that. And I'm kind of okay with pushing those buttons now.
Nice.
It's kind of fun.
That's great. Uh, if anyone has any questions, we're gonna wrap this up pretty soon. I really appreciate you taking the time uh, and sharing your space. And it's good. We've gotten to catch up. We talked this week as well.
Yeah.
Um, hope to see you in Portland in the near future. And also, you're obviously welcome in Nashville anytime. So does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, it's been a blast, man.
It's been really fun. Oh, and by the way, so Mark, you have two books, children's books. Is that correct?
Yeah, the little kids' board books, there are two. I Want to Be a Drummer and I Want to Be a Reader. And there's a third that is due out spring of 2021.
Ah, nice. And we have the I Want to Be a Drummer in my. I've read that to my son
Nice.
countless times, so that's been an influence for him. Uh, we definitely appreciate that.
Yep.
Um, anything you want to say in closing?
No, man, other than just thanks for having me on here and chatting today. This is awesome just to get to catch up with you.
Oh yeah, thank you for doing this, and just for anyone's tuning in, next week there'll be a roundtable. We did a roundtable last week. It'll be with Chris Brown, who's a drummer percussionist in Portland, Jake Leckie, who's a bassist, composer, engineer in LA, and Lindsay Miller, who's a guitarist, session guitarist here in Nashville, who I believe she plays with Dolly Parton some. So anyway, so I think it'll be a really interesting panel talking about how kind of like what we talked about today, but how we are getting creative with what we do and how we can all find ways of of doing what we do, and also using this time to if you are trying to make a pivot of some sort, it could be a good time for that. So anyway, thank you so much, Mark. Let's stay in touch, and maybe we can get a Portland Percussion Project online collaboration going.
I love that idea.
Cool. Well, have a great rest of your day and great weekend.
Awesome, man. See you later.
All right. Bye.